The statement sat there on my kitchen table, innocent-looking white paper that shattered my world in an instant. I'd opened Robert's mail by accident. We'd been married 18 years, and mail sorting had become an automatic habit. Bank of America, Sarah's college fund. A fund we'd been building since our daughter was born, setting aside every spare penny for her future. Balance: $643.12. There had to be some mistake. Just last month, the balance was over $120,000. I checked the transaction history, my hands shaking as I flipped to the second page. 5 withdrawals in the past 3 weeks, all authorized by Robert. The largest was $7,500 2 days ago. "Mom, have you seen my blue hoodie?" Sarah called from upstairs. My 17-year-old daughter, brilliant and hardworking, had earned early acceptance to Cornell, her dream school, the school that would cost nearly $60,000 a year. "Check the laundry room," I managed to call back, quickly folding the statement and tucking it into my pocket. Sarah couldn't know. Not yet. Not until I figured out what was happening. I texted Robert. "Need to talk when you get home. Important." His response came hours later. "Working late. Don't wait up. Working late." The same excuse for the past 4 months. I'd believed him because I'd always believed him. Robert, the reliable accountant, the devoted father, the husband who remembered anniversaries and birthdays without prompts. Working late while our daughter's future disappeared dollar by dollar. I poured myself a glass of wine, then abandoned it untouched. I needed clarity tonight, not comfort. My laptop opened to our joint checking account, his paycheck deposited faithfully every 2 weeks. No unusual transactions there. The mortgage account, payments on schedule, the joint savings, untouched. Then, I checked my personal email, the one I rarely used anymore. 3 messages from American Express flagging unusual activity on our joint card. Charges at Tiffany & Co. Asher, the Four Seasons, women's clothing stores I'd never entered. The most recent from yesterday, a $4,200 charge at an upscale restaurant in the city. My hands moved instinctively to the locked drawer in my home office. The key remained hidden in the hollow book on the shelf, untouched for years. Inside the drawer sat a burgundy folder marked Wellington Estate. My grandmother's legacy, the secret I'd kept even from Robert, the money I'd promised myself would always remain separate, my safety net. "Never tell a man about all your resources," Grandma Wellington had whispered to me on her deathbed, her aristocratic Boston accent still strong despite 50 years in Chicago. "The moment a man knows everything you have, he believes it all belongs to him." At 19, I dismissed it as the paranoia of a woman from another era. At 43, with my daughter's college fund drained and evidence of my husband's deception spread across the kitchen table, Grandma Wellington's words echoed, like prophecy. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unfamiliar number. "Robert left his wallet at my place again. I'm keeping it this time unless he makes it worth my while. Tell him Emma says hi." I stared at the message, addressed to a number Emma clearly thought belonged to Robert. The pieces clicked into horrible alignment: working late, the missing money, the luxury purchases, the restaurant charges. I typed Robert's name into Facebook's search bar, then Emma, scrolling through mutual connections. Nothing. Then Instagram. And there they were, Robert's arm around a blonde at least 15 years younger than me, both holding champagne glasses, the Manhattan skyline behind them. His profile set to private, but hers. Emma Laurent, living my best life. Open for anyone to see. A dozen photos of my husband with this woman. Weekend getaways, Broadway shows, ski trips when he'd told me he was at accounting conferences. "Mom?" Sarah appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her face. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I closed the laptop. "Everything's fine, sweetie, just some work stress." The lie tasted bitter. "Dad's not coming home for dinner again?" No, he's working late. Sarah sighed. He's always working late lately. Yes, I said, reaching a decision as the word left my mouth. But things are about to change. Robert didn't come home that night. I sat in the dark living room until 3 a.m., rehearsing what I would say, how I would remain calm when every cell in my body screamed for justice. Sarah was asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware that her future had been traded for diamond jewelry and luxury hotel rooms. When headlights finally swept across our driveway at 6:30 a.m., I was dressed in my charcoal business suit, hair pulled back, makeup perfect. Battle armor. Robert stumbled through the door, loosening his tie. He froze when he saw me sitting at the kitchen island, the bank statement and credit card bills arranged neatly before me. "Margaret, why are you up so early?" His voice carried the artificial cheerfulness he'd perfected lately. Then his eyes fell on the papers, and the color drained from his face. "Sit down, Robert." My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Cold, controlled, unfamiliar. "I can explain," he began, but I raised my hand to silence him. "Sarah's college fund," I said, tapping the bank statement. $120,000. Gone. He sank into the chair across from me, tie hanging limply around his neck. "It's not what you think." Tiffany's, Four Seasons, La Petite Maison, $4,200 for dinner. I pushed the credit card statements toward him. Is Emma's company really worth that much? Or were there others at this dinner party? His head snapped up at the name. "How do you—" "She texted me by mistake. Seems you left your wallet at her place. Again." I slid my phone across the table, the message displayed on screen. "She's very pretty, much younger. I saw the Instagram photos." "Maggie, please, don't call me Maggie, not now." Only those closest to me used that name, and Robert had forfeited that privilege. "What I need to know is simple. Did you spend our daughter's college fund on your mistress?" He looked down, shoulders slumping. Confirmation enough. "I made some bad investments," he mumbled. "I was trying to grow the fund faster for Sarah. When things went south, I panicked. Emma, she was just someone to talk to at first. Then it became more. So you spent what remained of Sarah's future on keeping your girlfriend happy?" My voice remained steady, though my hands trembled beneath the table. "I'm going to pay it back," he insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "I've got a bonus coming next month. I've applied for a loan. I can fix this." "The acceptance deadline for Cornell is in 3 weeks, Robert. Sarah's been checking the mail every day for the financial aid package." I leaned forward. "What exactly is your plan?" He ran his hands through his hair, disheveled and greasy. "I don't know. Maybe she should consider the state university. It's more practical anyway." My calm facade nearly shattered. State university was fine for many, but Sarah had worked herself to exhaustion for 4 years to get into Cornell's engineering program. Her dream hinged on that money we'd promised would be there. "I trusted you," I said, each word precise. "Sarah? Trusted you? I know I screwed up, but I'll make it right." His eyes pleaded with mine, searching for the forgiveness I'd always given before. "Give me another chance, Maggie. For Sarah's sake." "For Sarah's sake," I repeated, the irony nearly choking me. "The same Sarah whose future you gambled away? The same Sarah who's going to learn her father valued his midlife crisis more than her education? Don't tell her," he begged. "Please don't tell her about the money or about Emma." I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "I'm taking Sarah to school. When we return, I expect you to be gone." Panic flashed across his face. "Gone? What are you saying? I'm saying, get out. Pack enough for a week. I need time to think. And I can't do that with you here making excuses." "This is my house too," he protested weakly. "The house with the mortgage that I've been paying since your temporary pay cut 3 years ago?" I gathered the statements into a folder. Check the deed, Robert. It's in my name. He stared at me as if seeing a stranger. In some ways, I was. The Margaret who would have wept, begged for explanations, tried to understand his betrayal. She was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone forged in the fire of his deception. "Where am I supposed to go?" he asked, his voice small. "I hear Emma has a lovely place." I picked up my purse and car keys. "Maybe she'll let you stay if you make it worth her while." Sarah sensed something was wrong the moment she came downstairs. The kitchen felt different, tense, altered, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the morning's confrontation. "Where's Dad?" she asked, pouring herself coffee. "His car's gone." I busied myself making toast we both knew she wouldn't eat. "He left early for a meeting." Sarah studied my face, too perceptive for her 17 years. "Mom, what's going on? You're wearing your power suit at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday." The lie I'd prepared evaporated under my daughter's direct gaze. She deserved better than deception, even the well-intentioned kind. "Sit down, sweetheart." I gestured to the kitchen island. "There's something I need to tell you." Her face paled. "Is it Dad? Is he sick?" "No, nothing like that." I took her hands in mine. "It's about your college fund." The words came steadily as I explained the withdrawals, omitting the details about Emma. Those could wait. Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, to a hollow understanding that made her look suddenly older. "So, Cornell isn't happening?" Her voice cracked on the university's name. "That's what I need to talk to you about." I squeezed her hands. "Cornell is still happening." "But how? You said the money's gone." I took a deep breath. "There's something I've never told you or your father. Something my grandmother made me promise. To keep private." I led Sarah to my office, unlocked the drawer with the key from the hollow book, and removed the burgundy folder. Inside lay the documents that had been my secret safety net for 24 years. "Your great-grandmother Wellington left me an inheritance when I was 19, I explained, showing her the trust documents. "A significant one." Sarah's eyes widened as she saw the figures. "Mom, this is millions." "Yes," I nodded. "Invested and grown over time. I never touched it, never mentioned it to your father. But why keep it secret? We could have had a bigger house, better cars. Dad's always saying we need to budget carefully." I smiled sadly. My grandmother had specific instructions. The Wellington women have always maintained financial independence, even in marriage, especially in marriage. I turned to the trust's terms. The money was meant for 3 purposes: education, security in hardship, and to pass on to the next generation of Wellington women. "That's me," Sarah whispered, understanding dawning on her face. "That's you," I confirmed. "And your education is exactly what this money was always intended for." Sarah stared at the documents, processing. "Does Dad know you're going to use this money now?" "No." I closed the folder. "And for the moment, I'd like to keep it that way." "You're getting divorced, aren't you?" Her directness startled me. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But things between your father and me are complicated right now," Sarah nodded slowly. "It's not just the money, is it? There's someone else." My breath caught. "What makes you say that?" "Dad's late nights. The way he guards his phone. How he always showers as soon as he gets home." She gave a bitter laugh. "I'm not a child, Mom. I've seen the signs." I pulled her into a hug, this magnificent girl who saw too much. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart." "Don't be," she said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "It's not your fault." We stayed like that for several minutes, mother and daughter, the last of the Wellington women, holding each other in a moment of painful clarity. Finally, Sarah pulled back. So, what happens now? Now, I said, closing the drawer. We contact Cornell's financial aid office. We secure your spot. And we figure out our next steps. And Dad? Your father needs to make his own choices. I stood straighter. But first, I need to visit my lawyer. The Wellington Trust has always been separate from our marital assets. But I want to make absolutely certain it stays that way. Sarah nodded, a strange mix of sadness and determination in her eyes. He really has no idea, does he, about any of this money? No, I said. Your father has always seen what he expected to. See, a middle-class family living within its means. He never questioned where my half of the mortgage payments came from after I scaled back my work hours when you were born. He never wondered how we afforded your summer programs on our declared income. Because he wasn't paying attention, Sarah concluded. Because he wasn't paying attention, I agreed. And now he's about to discover just how costly that inattention will be. Eleanor Blackwell's law office hadn't changed in 20 years. The same leather chairs, the same oil paintings of New England landscapes, the same subtle scent of lemon polish and old books. Eleanor herself seemed unchanged too, her silver hair, in the same elegant bob, her posture still military straight, despite being well into her 70s. Margaret Wellington, she said, rising from behind her desk. It's been, 7 years? 8, I corrected, accepting her brief hug. Sarah's 10th birthday, you brought that ridiculous chemistry set, and she used it to dye your cat temporarily blue, as I recall. Eleanor gestured for me to sit. I assume this isn't a social call. I placed the folder containing the bank statements and credit card bills on her desk. Robert emptied our daughter's college fund. I need to protect what remains of our assets, and I need to ensure the Wellington Trust stays untouched. Eleanor reviewed the documents, her expression giving nothing away. When she finished, she removed her reading glasses, fixing me with her penetrating gaze. You never told him about the trust. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. No, Grandma Wellington's instructions were clear, and wise, as it turns out. Eleanor leaned back. The trust is ironclad, Margaret. We structured it specifically to remain separate from marital assets. Robert has no claim to it, cannot access it, and most importantly, cannot incur debt against it. Relief washed through me. So Cornell is safe for Sarah? Absolutely. And your financial security is safe as well. The question now is what you want to do about Robert. I stared out her office window at the Chicago skyline, the spring sunshine making the buildings gleam like beacons. I don't know yet. Divorce seems inevitable, but you've been married 18 years and endings are rarely clean, Eleanor finished for me. Her own divorce 30 years ago was legendary for its complexity and eventual favorability to her. Exactly. And there's Sarah to consider. Eleanor nodded. What does Sarah know? About the college fund? Everything. About the trust? Everything. About Robert's affair? I trailed off. She's figured out most of it on her own. Smart girl. Just like her mother. Eleanor opened her laptop. Let's game this out. If you divorce Robert, what's the worst-case scenario? He fights for half of everything, drags it out, makes Sarah's life miserable during her first year at college, possibly demands alimony since my declared income is lower than his. I'd been rehearsing this list in my head since dawn. And the best case? A clean break. I keep the house, which is already in my name. We divide the remaining joint assets fairly. He acknowledges his responsibility for the missing college fund and agrees to pay it back over time, Eleanor typed as I spoke. And what about Emma? My throat tightened. What about her? Does she know he's married? Has he promised her anything? Financial entanglements we should be aware of? I hadn't considered this angle. I don't know. The text message suggested a certain expectation. And the spending indicates he's been supporting a lifestyle far beyond what he could actually afford. Men like Robert often make promises they can't keep, Eleanor mused. The Tiffany purchases are concerning. Jewelry often comes with expectations of commitment. My wedding ring suddenly felt heavy on my finger. I twisted it absently, a habit, from whenever I felt anxious. You think he's been promising her marriage? It's possible. And if so, she may become a complicating factor if she realizes her wealthy future is evaporating. Eleanor stopped typing. Margaret, I need to ask a difficult question. How much do you want from this divorce? I considered carefully. I want Sarah's future secured. I want to keep my home. And I want Robert to face consequences for what he's done without destroying him completely. Eleanor's eyebrow raised slightly. Most clients in your position would want blood. I'm not. Most clients. And revenge seems exhausting, she nodded, a hint of approval in her expression. Then I suggest we begin with a forensic accounting of your finances. Track every penny that left that college fund. Document the timeline of his affair alongside the financial deception. She tapped a manicured nail on the credit card statement. The law doesn't particularly care about infidelity these days, but judges absolutely care about financial betrayal, especially when it impacts children. I took a deep breath. And Robert? What do I tell him when he inevitably asks to come home? Eleanor closed her laptop. Tell him you're exploring your options. Tell him you need space. Tell him whatever buys you time while we build our case. She leaned forward. But Margaret, do not, under any circumstances, reveal the Wellington Trust. That's our ace card, and we play it only when necessary. As I left Eleanor's office, my phone buzzed with a text. Robert, can we talk? I miss you and Sarah. Made a huge mistake. Please. I slipped the phone back into my purse without responding. The Margaret who would have immediately answered, seeking reconciliation, eager to smooth things over, she was gone. In her place was a Wellington woman, calculating her next move carefully. The coffee shop was her choice, a trendy place in River North with exposed brick walls and overpriced lattes. I arrived early, selecting a table in the corner that offered privacy without isolation. Eleanor would have advised against this meeting, but some things needed to be seen face to face. I recognized Emma immediately when she walked in. Younger than in her Instagram photos, perhaps 28 or 29. Expensively dressed in a way that appeared effortless, cashmere sweater, designer jeans, boots that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Robert's taste, financed by my daughter's future. Her confident stride faltered when she spotted me. She'd clearly expected to meet Robert, not his wife. To her credit, she didn't flee. Instead, she approached my table, chin raised slightly. You must be Margaret. Her voice carried the faint remains of a southern accent, carefully polished away, but emerging under stress. And you must be Emma. Thank you for coming. Coffee? I gestured to the empty chair across from me. I thought I was meeting Robert. She remained standing, one hand clutching her designer bag like a shield. Robert doesn't know about this meeting. Please, sit. I promise this won't take long. Curiosity won over caution. She slid into the chair, peeling off her leather gloves. A diamond tennis bracelet glinted on her wrist, new from the way she kept glancing at it. Another Tiffany purchase, most likely. I don't know what you think you know, she began, but I interrupted gently. I know my husband has been having an affair with you for approximately 7 months. I know he's spent considerable sums on you, including jewelry, clothing, and luxury hotel stays. What I don't know, and what I'd like to understand, is what you believe your future with Robert looks like. She blinked, thrown off by my directness. That's between Robert and me. Under normal circumstances, I'd agree. But these aren't normal circumstances. I placed a folder on the table between us. This is a copy of our daughter's college fund statement. The fund Robert emptied to finance your relationship. Emma's gaze dropped to the folder, but she didn't open it. I don't know anything about money. Robert handles all that. Robert handles all that, I repeated. Just like he handled our finances? The ones he's been systematically draining to maintain your lifestyle? Her cheeks flushed. He said you two were separated, that you had your own money. Did he specify when this separation occurred? Because I only discovered his infidelity 3 days ago. Emma's composure cracked slightly. She reached for her water glass, her hand trembling. He told me you two hadn't been real partners for years, that you had an arrangement. The only arrangement we had was building a life together and saving for our daughter's education. I leaned forward. Emma, I'm not here to vilify you. I suspect Robert has been lying to both of us. What I need to know is whether he's made promises to you that involve financial commitments. She twisted the bracelet on her wrist. He said once his divorce was finalized, we could start fresh. That he'd take care of me. Did he mention any specific assets? Property? Investments? A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. He talked about a lake house in Michigan and investments that would mature next year, enough that I could quit my job and focus on my painting. The lake house that didn't exist, the investments that were actually Sarah's college fund. I felt a wave of pity for this young woman, manipulated just as thoroughly as I had been, if in different ways. Emma, I need to be very clear. Robert does not have the resources he's promised you. The money he's been spending was our daughter's education fund, which is now nearly depleted. There is no lake house. There are no maturing investments. Disbelief crossed her features, followed quickly by anger. You're lying, trying to scare me off. I pushed the folder closer to her. See for yourself. The withdrawals coincide precisely with your weekend trips and larger purchases. The last one, $87,500 2 days ago. What was that for? Her face paled. He said it was an investment opportunity, something that would double quickly. And did you see any documentation of this investment? She shook her head slowly, realization dawning. He said the paperwork was being processed. I nodded, understanding now. Robert hadn't just been having an affair, he'd been operating a small-scale Ponzi scheme, using Sarah's college fund to create the illusion of wealth and promising returns that would never materialize. What are you going to do? Emma asked, suddenly looking much younger, more vulnerable. I'm consulting with my lawyer about divorce proceedings. Robert will need to account for the missing funds. And me? Her voice was small now. Are you going? To tell everyone? Ruin my reputation? Your reputation is the least of my concerns right now. My priority is protecting my daughter. I gathered my purse. But Emma, if I were you, I'd take a very careful look at any financial promises Robert has made, and perhaps consult an attorney of your own. As I stood to leave, she caught my arm. He told me he loved me, that we were building a future. The pain in her eyes was genuine, and for a moment I saw myself 20 years ago, believing in Robert's promises, his vision of our future. The difference was, I had Grandma Wellington's trust and wisdom to fall back on. Emma had only a diamond bracelet and shattered illusions. I believe he told you that, I said gently. Robert has always been very convincing when describing futures he can't deliver. Robert returned to the house on a rainy Thursday afternoon, exactly 9 days after I'd told him to leave. I was in my home office, reviewing Cornell's financial aid forms, when I heard his key in the lock. His footsteps hesitated in the foyer, before making their way toward the sound of my keyboard. He looked terrible, unshaven, clothes wrinkled, the confident posture I'd known for 18 years replaced by a defensive slouch. He held a small bouquet of grocery store flowers, the kind he used to bring home when we were first married and couldn't afford better. Margaret, he said, his voice raspy. Can we talk? I saved the document I was working on and closed my laptop. Sarah won't be home for another 3 hours. You can say what you need to say. He placed the flowers awkwardly on the edge of my desk. I've ended things with Emma. It was a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life. Which part was the mistake, Robert? The affair, or emptying our daughter's college fund to finance it? He flinched. All of it. I got lost somehow. Turned into someone I don't recognize. He dragged a hand through his disheveled hair. I spoke with Dean Mercer at Cornell, explained the situation, asked about payment plans. My eyebrows rose. You contacted Cornell without consulting me? I'm trying to fix what I broke, he insisted. Dean Mercer said with Sarah's academic record, she qualifies for several merit scholarships. It won't cover everything, but it's a start. A start that should never have been necessary. I leaned back in my chair. Where have you been staying? Chris's couch. His college roommate, now a divorced insurance salesman living in Evanston. Emma kicked me out when she realized... He trailed off. When she realized you'd been lying to her too, I supplied. That? There was no lake house, no investment portfolio about to mature? Surprise flickered across his face. How did you know about that? Emma and I had coffee yesterday. An illuminating conversation. The blood drained from his face. You met with... Emma? She deserved to know the truth just as I did. Just as Sarah did. He sank into the chair opposite my desk, looking defeated. So everyone knows what a fraud I am. Not everyone. Your colleagues still think you're the reliable family man. Your clients still trust you with their money, though I wonder if they should. That's not fair, he protested weakly. I've never mismanaged client funds. Just your daughter's future. I closed the folder containing Cornell's forms. What do you want, Robert? Why are you here? I want to come home, he said simply. I want another chance. I'll sleep in the guest room. I'll give you all the space you need. I'll work 2 jobs if necessary to repay Sarah's fund. Part of me, a smaller part than I'd expected, wanted to believe him. The Robert I'd married had been honest, dedicated, ambitious in the best ways. I searched his face for traces of that man. It's not that simple, I said finally. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend easily, especially when the breach impacts our child. I know, he whispered. But we built 18 years together, Maggie. Doesn't that count for something? The nickname slipped out naturally, and for a moment I saw him as he'd been when we first met. Eager, earnest, full of plans for our future together. The man who'd held my hand through labor, who'd taught Sarah to ride a bike, who'd supported my decision to scale back my career when full-time work became too much. Yes, I admitted. It counts for something, but I don't know if it's enough. Hope flickered in his eyes. Just let me try, please. I considered Eleanor's advice about buying time. 3 conditions, I said finally. First, you sleep in the guest room and give me the space I need to think. Second, you come with me to see a marriage counselor. My choice, not yours. And third, you provide a complete accounting of every penny that left Sarah's college fund and where it went. Agreed, he said quickly. Too quickly. I've already started tracking the withdrawals. Some of it went to Emma, but not all. I made some bad investments trying to recover losses. I'll show you everything. I've already consulted a lawyer, I informed him. She'll be reviewing whatever documentation you provide. He nodded, accepting this. What about Sarah? How is she? Hurt, confused, angry. She knows everything, Robert. About the affair, about the money. She's 17, not 7. She deserves honesty. Will she even speak to me? That's up to her. I won't interfere either way. I glanced at my watch. She has debate practice until 6. If you want to be here when she gets home, I suggest you clean yourself up first. And Robert. I fixed him with a steady gaze. If you're not prepared, To face her anger, her questions, her disappointment. Then don't be here when she arrives. She doesn't need more abandonment. I'll be here, he promised, rising from the chair. And Maggie, thank you for even considering giving me a chance to make this right. As he left my office, shoulders a little straighter with renewed purpose, I opened my laptop again and wrote a quick email to Eleanor. Robert has returned, proceeding as discussed. Continue preparation of divorce documents as contingency. The Wellington women had always believed in preparation for all possibilities, and while part of me hoped for reconciliation, for Sarah's sake if nothing else, the practical part, the part that had kept Grandma Wellington's trust a secret all these years, knew better than to mistake hope for strategy. The forensic accountant's report arrived on a Tuesday morning, a sterile manila envelope containing the detailed autopsy of our financial life together. Eleanor had recommended Vivian Chen, describing her as relentless, thorough, and discreet, qualities that felt essential as we excavated the ruins of what I'd thought was a transparent marriage. I laid the report on the kitchen table, the morning sunlight illuminating columns of numbers that told a story far different from the one Robert had shared with me. "Is that it?" Sarah asked, pausing at the kitchen doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder. She'd been keeping careful distance from her father since his return 2 weeks ago, civil but reserved, unwilling to grant the easy forgiveness he clearly craved. "Ms. Chen's analysis," I confirmed. "I haven't reviewed it yet." Sarah hesitated. "Do you want company?" She'd inherited my analytical mind, approaching problems with the same methodical care I'd learned from Grandma Wellington. "Don't you have AP Calculus this morning?" She checked her watch. "Not for 2 hours. Exam schedule, remember?" I gestured to the chair beside me. Together, we opened the report, its contents laid out with clinical precision. The first pages confirmed what we already knew, the systematic emptying of Sarah's college fund. But then came revelations. A secret credit card opened in Robert's name alone, with charges dating back not 7 months as I'd thought, but nearly 2 years. Expensive restaurants, hotels, jewelry stores. Emma hadn't been the first, merely the most recent and most expensive in a series of infidelities. Sarah's hand found mine under the table, squeezing tight. But the true shock came on page 17. "Second mortgage?" I whispered, staring at the entry. "That's not possible. The house is in my name." Sarah leaned closer. "It says co-signed by Margaret Davis. That's not even your name." Something cold settled in my stomach. I flipped to the EO appendix where copies of the relevant documents were attached. There it was, a second mortgage on our home, taken out 14 months ago, with my purported signature next to Robert's. My maiden name, Davis, which I hadn't used since our wedding. "Day. He forged your signature," Sarah said, her voice hollow with disbelief. I studied the signature more closely. It was close enough to fool a bank clerk who wasn't looking carefully. But the M was wrong, the loop too rounded. I never wrote my M that way. "How much?" Sarah asked, turning back to the summary page. $246,000, I replied, the number burning into my vision. Almost exactly the equity we had in the property. Sarah did the quick math. So between this and my college fund, he's stolen nearly $370,000 from our family. The statement hung in the air between us, its weight almost physical. "What are you going to do?" Sarah's voice was smaller now, younger. Before I could answer, the front door opened and closed. Robert's footsteps approached the kitchen, lighter these days, tentative in his own home. He froze in the doorway when he saw us at the table, the report spread between us. His eyes fell on the familiar manila folder with Vivian Chen's office logo, and what little color remained in his face drained away. "You were never going to tell me about the second mortgage, were you?" I asked quietly. He gripped the doorframe, knuckles white. "I was going to pay it off before you ever needed to know." "With what money, Dad?" Sarah's voice cracked. You already emptied my college fund. Robert flinched at the direct accusation from his daughter, a pain that seemed to penetrate where my questions hadn't. I made a terrible mistake, several terrible mistakes, but I'm fixing it. I have a plan. Another plan? I gestured to the report. Like the investments that lost the first $120,000? Or perhaps like forging my signature to steal the equity from our home? It wasn't like that, he protested. I was desperate. Some of my clients were threatening to leave after the Harrison portfolio tanked. I needed to show stability, success, the trips, the gifts, the lifestyle. It was all about keeping appearances, maintaining confidence. And Emma? The other women before her? Were they about maintaining confidence too? The coldness in my voice surprised even me. Robert's shoulders slumped. I can't defend that. I got lost in a persona I created. The successful advisor, the man who could afford luxury, who attracted beautiful women. It felt validating somehow. Well, I hope the validation was worth $370,000, I said. Because that's what it cost. That's what you stole from your family. I'll make it right, he insisted, a desperate edge to his voice. I've applied for loans. I'm talking to headhunters about higher-paying positions. I've listed my car. Sarah stood abruptly. Your BMW isn't going to pay for Cornell, Dad. Sarah, please, he began. But she cut him off. You know what the worst part is? It's not even about the money. It's that you lied. For years. To both of us. She grabbed her backpack. I need to get to school. After she left, silence stretched. Between Robert and me, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of morning traffic. She'll never forgive me, he finally said. She might, eventually, I replied. Sarah has a generous heart, but forgiveness doesn't mean freedom from consequences, Robert. He nodded, accepting this truth. What happens now? I closed the forensics report carefully, placing it back in its envelope. Now I contact the police to report identity theft and mortgage fraud. Now I file for divorce. Now you face the consequences of choices you've made over the past 2 years. The police? His voice rose in panic. Margaret, that would destroy my career. I'd lose my license. I'd never be able to pay anything back. You should have considered that before forging my signature on a mortgage document. I stood, suddenly exhausted by his presence. I gave you a chance, Robert. 3 conditions, remember? Complete accounting of the missing money was one of them. You failed to mention a forged second mortgage. I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid you'd do exactly what you're doing now. What I'm doing is protecting what remains of our family's financial security. What I'm doing is showing Sarah that actions have consequences, even for people we love. And sending me to jail accomplishes that? I studied him. This man I'd shared a bed with for 18 years, whose child I'd carried, whose dreams I'd supported. He looked small now, diminished, like a paper cutout of the Robert I'd married. I don't know if you'll go to jail, I said honestly. That's for the courts to decide. But I do know I can't protect you from this, not without becoming complicit in it. What about Sarah? What about how this affects her? You should have considered Sarah before emptying her college fund and mortgaging her home. I picked up my phone, my decision crystallizing. I'm calling Eleanor now. I suggest you find a lawyer of your own. The police detective who took my statement was a woman in her 40s, with tired eyes and a practiced neutral expression that revealed nothing. Detective Morales sat across from Eleanor and me in a windowless room at the station, reviewing the documents we'd brought, the forensic accountant's report, copies of the forged mortgage papers, bank statements showing the systematic emptying of Sarah's college fund. And when did you become aware of the second mortgage, Mrs. Davis? Detective Morales asked, using my married name despite my correction. Earlier. Tuesday morning, when I received the forensic accounting report. She made a note. And you're certain you didn't sign these documents? Absolutely certain. I haven't used my maiden name, Davis, on any legal document since our marriage, and the signature itself is clearly forged. Detective Morales nodded. We'll have our handwriting experts confirm, but it does appear suspect. Has your husband admitted to forging your signature? He hasn't denied it, I said carefully. He said he was going to pay it off before I needed to know. Classic admission by implication, Eleanor interjected. My client has provided all relevant documentation, Detective. We're prepared to pursue this both criminally and civilly. Detective Morales closed her notebook. We'll investigate and be in touch. Financial crimes involving spouses can be complicated, especially with joint accounts involved. The house was in my name only, I clarified, and my signature was forged. There's nothing complicated about that. You'd be surprised, she said with the weary voice of someone who'd seen too many cases dismissed. In the meantime, do you feel safe returning home? Is there any concern about physical retaliation from your husband? The question startled me. No, Robert isn't violent. People react unpredictably when their financial deceptions are exposed, Mrs. Davis. Consider staying elsewhere for a few days. Eleanor placed a hand on my arm. My client will be fine. Her husband has already moved out at her request. As we left the police station, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Dean Mercer called. Cornell needs confirmation about financial aid by Friday. Friday, 3 days away. The deadline we'd been working toward that now seemed impossibly close amid the chaos Robert had created. We need to accelerate the trust disbursement, I told Eleanor as we walked to her car. Sarah needs to confirm her enrollment by Friday. I've already started the paperwork, Eleanor assured me. The initial funds should be available by tomorrow, enough to secure Sarah's first year while we arrange the structured disbursements for subsequent years. Relief washed through me. At least one thing was proceeding smoothly. Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without your help through this. That's what Wellingtons do. We plan ahead and take care of our own. She gave me a sideways glance. Your grandmother would be proud of how you're handling this, Margaret. The compliment warmed me unexpectedly. Grandma Wellington had been gone for 2 decades, but her presence still shaped my decisions, her whispered advice about financial independence, now proving prophetic. When I arrived home, the house was quiet. Robert had taken most of his clothes and personal items the previous day, after I'd made it clear our trial reconciliation was over. His absence left strange empty spaces. His reading chair in the living room, his electric razor no longer on the bathroom counter, the closet half empty with too many hangers. I found Sarah in her bedroom, surrounded by Cornell brochures and course catalogs, her laptop open to the university's housing portal. Hey, I said, leaning against her doorframe. How was school? Surreal. She gestured to her Cornell materials. Everyone's talking about college plans, and I'm just sitting there wondering if I'll even be able to go. I crossed the room and sat on the edge of her bed. You're going, sweetheart. The money will be there by Friday. Hope flickered across her face. Really? From your trust? Yes. Eleanor's expediting everything. Sarah closed her laptop. So we're really doing this? Moving forward without Dad? We're moving forward, I confirmed. What happens with your father is up to the police now, and eventually the courts. She nodded slowly. Detective Morales called me, asked if I knew anything about Dad's finances, or the second mortgage. This information startled me. She called you directly? Without my knowledge? I'm 17, Mom, almost 18. She said it was standard procedure in family financial cases. I made a mental note to discuss this with Eleanor. What did you tell her? The truth. That I didn't know anything about the second mortgage until we saw the report together. That Dad managed all the family finances except for your personal accounts. She hesitated. She asked about your accounts, Mom. Whether Dad had access to them. A chill ran through me. And what did you say? That you always kept your accounts separate, that you were almost secretive about them. She looked at me directly. I didn't mention the trust specifically, but she seemed really interested in your financial independence. Interesting angle for a detective investigating mortgage fraud. I'd definitely need to discuss this with Eleanor. Mom, Sarah said hesitantly, is Dad going to go to jail? The vulnerability in her voice reminded me that despite her maturity, she was still a child facing the collapse of her family structure. I don't know, sweetheart. What he did was serious. Identity theft, fraud, misappropriation of funds, but first-time offenders often get probation, especially in financial cases. If he goes to jail, it's because I said something to Detective Morales, isn't it? Because I told her about him emptying my college fund? No. I took her hands firmly, in mine. If your father faces legal consequences, it's because of choices he made, not because of anything you or I said to the police. We're just telling the truth, Sarah. The truth about actions he took deliberately, repeatedly, over years. She nodded, but doubt lingered in her eyes. Why do you think he did it? I mean, I understand the affair part. It's gross and cliché, but it happens. But stealing, forgery, that's not the Dad I thought I knew. I've been asking myself the same question, I admitted. The best explanation I can find is that he created a lifestyle he couldn't actually afford, and then made increasingly desperate choices to maintain it. Like a Ponzi scheme, Sarah said, using new money to cover old promises until it all falls apart. Exactly like that. I squeezed her hands. But here's what I need you to remember. None of this is your fault, and nothing that's happened changes. Your future. You're still going to Cornell. You're still going to become the brilliant engineer you've worked so hard to be. Thanks to the Wellington women, she said, the ghost of a smile crossing her face. Thanks to the Wellington women, I agreed. And to your own hard work and determination. We Wellington women make our own paths, remember? As Sarah returned to her college planning, I headed downstairs, my phone buzzing with an incoming call. Robert's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Detective Morales just called me in for questioning, he said without preamble, his voice tight, with panic. Margaret, what have you done? The Wellington Trust documents lay spread across Eleanor's conference table, their legal language precise and unyielding. The trust officer from Boston Private Bank, Patricia Harrington, reviewed each page with meticulous attention, occasionally making notes on her leather portfolio. Everything appears in order, Ms. Wellington, she said finally, using my birth name as specified in the trust. Your grandmother's provisions were quite clear. Education expenses for female descendants take priority, followed by security during times of hardship or transition. And the timeline? I asked, acutely aware of Cornell's Friday deadline. Patricia nodded, consulting her notes. We can execute the first disbursement by noon tomorrow. $120,000 earmarked specifically for Sarah's first-year expenses, with subsequent yearly disbursements to follow. Relief washed through me. Thank you. Your grandmother was quite forward-thinking, Patricia continued. The structure she established, keeping the Wellington assets separate across generations of married women, was unusual for her time. Adelaide. Wellington had reason to be cautious, Eleanor interjected. Her first husband's gambling debts nearly destroyed the family fortune before she managed to secure a divorce. This was news to me. I never knew Grandma had been married before Grandpa Wellington. Adelaide rarely spoke of it, Eleanor explained. It was considered scandalous in those days, a divorce, followed by her taking back control of her family's shipping investments. The trust was her way of ensuring no Wellington woman would ever find herself financially trapped again. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Detective Morales. Need to speak with you again. New information has emerged. Please call. ASAP. Unease prickled along my spine. Excuse me, I need to make a call. In the privacy of Eleanor's empty office, I returned Detective Morales's call. She answered immediately. Mrs. Davis, we've uncovered some concerning information in your husband's financial activities. Are you aware of any private accounts you might have that he could have accessed? My heart stuttered. What do you mean? There are discrepancies in the mortgage documentation beyond the forged signature. The second mortgage proceeds, $246,000, were deposited into an account we cannot locate. Your husband claims the account belongs to you. Cold dread settled in my stomach. That's impossible. I have my checking account, a small savings account, and my retirement account from when I worked full-time. Robert has no access to any of them. He specifically mentioned a legacy account, or family account, that you maintain separately from your joint finances. Said it was an inheritance you never disclosed during your marriage. The Wellington Trust. How had Robert learned about it? I'd been so careful. Detective Morales, my financial arrangements are not relevant to the forgery investigation. My husband stole my identity to secure a fraudulent mortgage on property held in my name alone. The destination of those funds is his responsibility. To explain. Ordinarily, I would agree, she replied, her tone shifting subtly. However, when a spouse maintains secret accounts that could have benefited the family, particularly accounts that could have prevented the financial desperation that allegedly led to the fraud, it becomes relevant. I closed my eyes, understanding exactly what had happened. Robert was attempting to build a defense by claiming knowledge of my separate assets that, had I shared them, would have eliminated his need to commit fraud. It was manipulative, desperate, and exactly the scenario Grandma Wellington had warned against. Detective, I'm going to have my attorney contact you directly about this matter. I won't be answering any further questions without her present. I ended the call and returned to the conference room, where Eleanor and Patricia were finalizing the trust disbursement paperwork. Robert knows about the trust, I announced without preamble. He's telling Detective Morales that I maintained secret accounts that could have prevented his financial desperation. Eleanor's expression hardened. He's building a defense strategy, trying to shift blame. Can he access the trust? The thought made my blood run cold. Absolutely not, Patricia assured me. The Wellington Trust is ironclad. No spouse has any claim whatsoever. But he could complicate the divorce, Eleanor acknowledged. Try to claim he's entitled to a portion based on your deception during the marriage. Would that work? I looked between the two women. It would not, Eleanor stated firmly. The trust predates your marriage, was never commingled with marital assets, and specifically excludes spouses by design. But he could drag things out, create delays, run up legal fees, and publicly expose the trust, I realized, the implications dawning on me, making it appear I hoarded family money while he stole to pay for Sarah's education. A compelling narrative, Eleanor agreed grimly. False, but compelling to those who don't understand trust law. Patricia closed her portfolio with a decisive snap. Ms. Wellington, if I may speak frankly, your grandmother anticipated exactly this scenario. There's a specific provision in the trust to address spousal attempts to access or expose the assets. She flipped to a section I'd never focused on before, pointing to paragraph 14b. In the event of matrimonial discord, wherein a spouse attempts to claim interest in trust assets or bring public attention to the trust's existence in a manner detrimental to beneficiaries' interests, the trustee is authorized to release public statements clarifying the trust's purpose and structure, specifically emphasizing its generational nature and educational focus. In plain English, Patricia explained, if Robert tries to use the trust against you publicly, We're authorized to issue a statement explaining that the Wellington Trust is a multi-generational educational fund for female descendants only, never intended for spousal benefit. I considered this. So, if he tries to paint me as hoarding money while he struggled, we clarify that the money was never for either of you, only for Sarah and future generations of Wellington women. Eleanor nodded approvingly. Adelaide thought of everything. As we completed the paperwork authorizing Sarah's educational disbursement, I felt a profound connection to my grandmother. She'd created this safety net not just for me, but for all Wellington women who might face betrayal or abandonment. Her foresight had secured not only Sarah's education, but her independence, a legacy more valuable than the money itself. That evening, I sat with Sarah in our kitchen, the trust disbursement confirmation in hand. It's official, I told her, sliding the document across the table. Cornell is covered, all 4 years. Relief washed over her face. So I can accept the admission offer? Sign the housing contract? Yes. I squeezed her hand. Your future is secure, regardless of what happens with the divorce or your father's legal situation. She studied the document, her finger tracing the Wellington Trust letterhead. You know, when you first told me about Great-Grandma Wellington's trust, I thought it was just about the money. But it's not, is it? It's about independence, about making sure we can always choose our own paths. Exactly, I said, pride swelling in my chest. The Wellington women have always understood that financial independence is the foundation of all other freedoms. Sarah looked up, her eyes shining with a new understanding. Dad never knew, did he? About who we really are? He knew we were Wellingtons, I replied. He just never understood what that meant. The divorce papers lay unsigned on Robert's attorney's desk. Michael Hoffman, a sharp-featured man with an aggressive reputation in matrimonial law, leaned back in his leather chair, assessing me coolly. My client is prepared to make a generous offer, he began, sliding a document across the mahogany expanse that separated us. Full responsibility for the depleted college fund, with a repayment plan over 10 years. No claim on the house or its equity. Child support until Sarah turns 21. Eleanor took the document, scanning its contents with practiced efficiency. And in exchange? Mrs. Davis drops all charges related to the alleged identity theft and forgery. The divorce proceeds as no fault, with minimal publicity. And he paused for emphasis. Full disclosure of all assets on both sides. There it was, the trap Robert had carefully constructed. Drop criminal charges in exchange for his promise to repay money he'd already stolen, while forcing me to publicly declare the Wellington Trust, exposing it to future claims. This isn't a negotiation, Mr. Hoffman, Eleanor replied. It's an attempt at extortion. The criminal charges aren't my client's to drop. They're being pursued by the district attorney's office based on evidence of clear criminal activity. Evidence that becomes much less compelling without the victim's cooperation, Hoffman countered smoothly. We both know how these cases typically proceed when spouses reconcile their differences. We're not reconciling, I stated firmly. And I have no intention of dropping the charges. Hoffman's expression hardened. Then I should inform you that my client is prepared to make the Wellington Trust a central issue in these proceedings. Secret assets maintained throughout a marriage raise significant questions about good faith in a marital partnership. Assets that predated the marriage were never commingled with marital funds and are structured specifically to benefit female descendants for educational purposes, Eleanor responded, unfazed. The trust is ironclad, Mr. Hoffman. Your client has no claim to it whatsoever. Perhaps not legally, he conceded with a thin smile. But the court of public opinion may view a wife who hoarded millions while her husband struggled to finance their daughter's education quite differently. I'd expected this argument, had prepared for it, but hearing it articulated so baldly still sent anger coursing through me. Mr. Hoffman, I said carefully, Let me be very clear. The Wellington Trust was established by my grandmother to ensure generational educational security for female descendants. It was never intended for marital use, never accessible to me personally, except in limited educational contexts, and your client was informed of its existence and purpose before our marriage. This last part was a calculated risk, a lie, but one Robert couldn't disprove without admitting he'd lied as well. Uncertainty flickered across Hoffman's face. Robert never mentioned prior knowledge of the trust, perhaps because acknowledging awareness would undermine his current strategy, Eleanor suggested. Miss Wellington, do you still have your grandmother's letter? The one explaining the trust conditions that you showed Robert before your engagement? I nodded, playing along with Eleanor's improvisation. In my safe deposit box, along with the prenuptial acknowledgement. There was no letter, no prenuptial acknowledgement. But Robert couldn't know that for certain, and the seeds of doubt we'd planted were already taking root in his attorney's mind. I'd like to see these documents, Hoffman said, his confidence wavering slightly. We'll provide copies during discovery, Eleanor promised. But in the meantime, perhaps you should have another conversation with your client about his recollection of events. Memory can be selective under stress. As we left Hoffman's office, Eleanor guided me toward a small cafe across the street. We need to create that letter, she said once we were seated with coffee. And the acknowledgement. You want me to forge documents? I whispered, shocked. After what Robert did? Not forge, Eleanor clarified. Create contemporary documents that reflect historical truths. Your grandmother did explain the trust to you. You did understand its generational nature. The only fiction is that you shared this information with Robert. I shook my head. I can't perjure myself, Eleanor. I won't become what he is. She studied me for a long moment. You're right, of course. It was a tactical suggestion, not an ethical one. She sighed. But we need another strategy to counter Robert's narrative. What about Grandma Wellington's provision? The one authorizing public clarification if a spouse attacks the trust? Eleanor nodded slowly. It's reactive rather than proactive, but yes, that remains an option if Robert pursues this line of attack. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Dad's outside our house, says he needs to talk to you. Should I let him? Ian, alarm shot through me. Robert's at the house, I told Eleanor, already gathering my things. With Sarah. Don't engage with him alone, she warned. If he's desperate enough to show up unannounced, he's desperate enough to say or do anything. I texted Sarah back. Don't let him in. I'm on my way. If he becomes insistent, call Detective Morales. When I arrived home 20 minutes later, Robert's car was still parked in our driveway, but he sat inside it rather than attempting to enter the house. Sarah watched from the living room window, her expression a mixture of anger and sadness. He's been sitting there for almost an hour, she said as I came inside, just staring at the house. Did he try to come in? She shook her head. He knocked first. When I told him through the door that you weren't home, he said he'd wait in his car. I placed my purse on the entryway table, decision crystallizing. I'm going to talk to him. Mom, Sarah protested. Eleanor said, I know what Eleanor said. But this has to end. We can't live with him lurking outside like some kind of ghost. I squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. Stay inside, but keep your phone ready to call Detective Morales if needed. Robert straightened when he saw me approach, rolling down his window. He looked terrible. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. The confident man I'd married now reduced to a hollow-eyed stranger. Margaret, he began, his voice hoarse. I'm sorry to come unannounced. Hoffman said the meeting didn't go well. That depends on your definition of well, I replied, keeping several feet between us. If you expected me to drop criminal charges and expose the Wellington Trust in exchange for promises you've already broken, then no. It didn't go well. He flinched. It's not That's not what I want. Then what do you want, Robert? Why are you sitting outside our home? I want my family back, he said simply. I want to fix what I broke. Some things can't be fixed. Trust, once shattered, doesn't simply reassemble. He nodded, accepting this. I know. But there must be a path forward that doesn't end with me in prison and Sarah ashamed of her father. The raw desperation in his voice struck a chord of pity within me. Unwelcome, but undeniable. This man had been my partner for 18 years, the father of my child. His actions were unforgivable, but his pain was still real. What are you proposing? I asked cautiously. A different kind of agreement, not through the lawyers. He reached into his jacket, producing a handwritten document. I've written everything down, all of it. The affairs, the stolen money, the forged mortgage, a full confession. I took the pages, scanning his familiar handwriting. It was all there. Dates, amounts, names, including women I hadn't known about. The complete anatomy of our marriage's destruction. What am I supposed to do with this? Whatever you think is right, he said. Turn it over to Detective Morales. Keep it as insurance. Burn it. It's your choice. He swallowed hard. I've also transferred my retirement account to you. It's not much, about $86,000. But it's a start toward repaying Sarah's college fund. I studied him, searching for the manipulation behind this apparent surrender. Why now? What changed? Sarah wouldn't look at me, he said, his voice cracking. When I knocked earlier, I could see her through the side window, but she turned away. Wouldn't even acknowledge me. He wiped roughly at his eyes. I realized I've lost everything that matters. My family, my daughter's respect, your trust. Fighting you with lawyers and accusations won't bring any of it back. And the Wellington Trust? Your claims that I hid money while you struggled? A desperate tactic, he admitted. Hoffman's idea, not mine. I knew about the trust, Margaret. Maybe not the details or the amount, but I've known for years that your family had money you kept separate. Shock rendered me momentarily speechless. How? Tax returns, he said simply. The small distributions for Sarah's summer programs were reported as trust income. I'm an accountant, remember? I noticed years ago, but I never said anything. Why not? He shrugged, a gesture of defeat. Pride, mostly. I wanted to be the provider, the successful husband who could give his family everything they needed. Acknowledging your separate wealth meant admitting I wasn't essential. The irony was breathtaking. Robert had known, had chosen not to discuss it, had built his identity around being the provider, and then had stolen from our daughter when that identity was threatened. The confession, the retirement account. What do you want in return? I asked, still wary of hidden motives. He hesitated. The chance to remain Sarah's father, not to be cut completely from her life. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I'm asking for her. She deserves to have a father, even a deeply flawed one who's trying to make amends. I looked down at the confession in my hands, the retirement account transfer confirmation clipped to its final page. It wasn't enough, nowhere near enough to repair the damage he'd done. But it was a beginning, an acknowledgement of responsibility without excuses. I'll think about it, I said finally. But Robert, the criminal investigation continues. This confession could help your case, showing cooperation and remorse, but it doesn't make the charges disappear. He nodded, accepting this reality. I know, and I'll face whatever consequences come. I just needed you to know that I'm not fighting anymore. Not you, not the truth. As he drove away, I stood in our driveway, the written evidence of our marriage's collapse clutched in my hands, wondering if his surrender was genuine remorse or simply another tactical repositioning in a game I was tired of playing. Sarah's acceptance letter to Cornell's engineering program lay framed on my desk, alongside the confirmation of her financial aid package, a combination of merit scholarships and the Wellington Trust disbursement. 3 months had passed since Robert's confession, a period of cautious rebuilding for Sarah and me as we navigated our new reality. The doorbell rang precisely at 11 a.m., and I steeled myself before answering. Richard Coleman, Robert's criminal attorney, stood on the porch, briefcase in hand, his expression professionally neutral. "Mrs. Davis," he greeted me. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." "Ms. Wellington," I corrected gently. "I've resumed my family name." I led him to the kitchen, where Eleanor already waited, documents arranged neatly before her. "Let's get straight to the point," Eleanor began once pleasantries were exchanged. "The district attorney has offered your client a plea agreement. We've been asked for our input, as the primary victims in this case." Coleman nodded. "Which is why I wanted to meet with you directly, Ms. Wellington. Robert has authorized me to accept whatever terms you consider fair within the DA's basic framework." The DA's offer lay before us. Robert would plead guilty to forgery and identity theft, with the more serious fraud charges dropped. 2 years imprisonment, likely reduced to 8 months with good behavior, followed by 5 years of probation. Restitution to be determined. Robert asked me to convey that he's prepared to surrender his CPA license, Coleman continued. He understands that his professional career in finance is over. He's already enrolled in a vocational certification program, construction management. It's something he can pursue after release, with no access to others' financial information. I studied the attorney, searching for signs of manipulation. And restitution? The college fund? The second mortgage? "He's proposing a structured settlement," Coleman replied, opening his briefcase and removing a document. "His retirement account has already been transferred to you, $86,000. He's selling his ownership stake in his firm for approximately $140,000, which would also go to you. The remaining balance would be paid through garnishment of future wages once he's employed again." Eleanor reviewed the proposal carefully. "This is surprisingly comprehensive." "Robert has had considerable time to reflect," Coleman said quietly. "He wanted me to emphasize that this isn't a negotiating position. It's his attempt to make whatever amends are possible, with no expectations of forgiveness." I remembered Robert sitting in his car 3 months ago, offering his confession without conditions. Perhaps that surrender had been genuine after all. "There's one more thing," Coleman added, removing a sealed envelope from his briefcase. "Robert asked me to give you this. It's personal, not legal, and I'm not privy to its contents." I accepted the envelope, recognizing Robert's handwriting on the front. Margaret and Sarah. Something inside me flinched at seeing our names linked in his familiar script. "What does the DA recommend regarding victim impact statements?" Eleanor asked, steering us back to legal matters. "They've indicated that statements from both Ms. Wellington and Sarah would be considered by the judge during sentencing," Coleman replied. "Whatever decision you make there, Robert has instructed me not to challenge or attempt to mitigate." Discussion continued for another hour, addressing practical details of the plea agreement, custody arrangements, largely moot with Sarah turning 18 soon, and tax implications of the restitution payments. Throughout, I found myself searching for the trap, the hidden angle that would reveal this apparent cooperation as another of Robert's manipulations. After Coleman left, Eleanor gathered her documents, studying me with concern. "Are you going to read it?" she asked, nodding toward the sealed envelope I'd placed on the counter. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to throw it away unopened." "Understandable," she said. "But consider that Sarah might want to know what her father has to say, even if you don't." I nodded, tucking the envelope into my desk drawer for later consideration. "What do you think of the plea deal? Is he getting off too easily?" Eleanor considered this. "Legally speaking, it's on the lighter side of similar cases. The lack of prior criminal history works in his favor. But the financial and professional consequences are substantial. He's effectively starting over from zero at 47. No career, no savings, no family home, a criminal record. And 8 months in a minimum security facility, I added. White-collar prison is no country club, despite what people think, Eleanor replied. But yes, the incarceration portion is relatively brief. The question is whether a longer sentence would serve any greater purpose for you or Sarah. Later that evening, with Eleanor's words echoing in my mind, I finally opened Robert's letter. Inside was a handwritten note, along with several legal documents. Margaret and Sarah, it began. Words cannot repair what I've broken through my actions. I offer no excuses, only my profound regret for betraying the two people I should have, protected above all others. The enclosed documents transfer my ownership of our vacation property in Michigan to Sarah directly. It was purchased with my inheritance from my parents and kept in my name alone. One of many deceptions I now regret. I've confirmed with my attorney that this asset cannot be considered part of the restitution, as it was never marital property. It rightfully belongs to Sarah. Margaret, I want you to know that I never deserved the years you gave me. I recognize now how your quiet strength held our family together, while my insecurities and weaknesses tore it apart. The Wellington legacy of independence and foresight protected Sarah when I failed to do so, exactly as your grandmother intended. There is a painful irony in the fact that if I had simply accepted your family's resources with gratitude instead of feeling threatened by them, none of this would have happened. Sarah, I failed you as a father in the most fundamental way possible. I sacrificed your future for my own gratification. I have no right to ask your forgiveness, but I hope someday you might allow me the chance to show you that I can be better than my worst mistakes. The man who abandoned your college fund is not the father I intended to be, nor the one I hope to become. I will accept whatever place or absence in your lives you determine is appropriate going forward. The plea agreement is my attempt to provide closure without further pain. If testifying about my actions would help either of you heal, I encourage you to do so without reservation. With deepest regret and enduring love, Robert, I set the letter down, emotions churning. The Michigan property, a small lakeside cabin Robert had inherited and renovated over years, had been our family's summer retreat. I'd always assumed it was joint property, another deception to add to the list. But transferring it directly to Sarah was an unexpected gesture, giving her something of her childhood that remained untainted by our marital collapse. When Sarah came home from her after-school robotics meeting, I showed her the letter and property documents. The cabins. Really mine? She asked, surprise evident in her voice. Just like that? Apparently it was always your father's separate property, so he can transfer it to you directly, I explained. Eleanor will need to review everything, but it appears legitimate. Sarah read the letter carefully, her expression guarded. Do you believe him? That he's really sorry, not just sorry he got caught. I considered my words carefully. I think your father is capable of genuine remorse. Whether that remorse translates to lasting change is something only time will reveal. She nodded slowly. Are you going to give a victim statement at his sentencing? I haven't decided. Will you? I think I need to, she said after a moment. Not to ask for a harsher sentence, but to tell my truth. To make sure he hears exactly what his choices cost me. She looked up, her eyes reflecting a maturity beyond her years. I loved Dad, part of me still does. But love without truth isn't really love at all. In her words, I heard echoes of Adelaide Wellington's wisdom, passed down through generations of women who'd learned that love required clear eyes and firm boundaries to survive. The courtroom's polished oak benches felt cold beneath my hands as I sat beside Sarah in the front row. Robert hadn't yet arrived, but his attorney, Richard Coleman, was already arranging documents at the defense table, occasionally glancing our way with professional neutrality. Are you sure you want to do this? I whispered to Sarah, studying her profile, so adult in her navy blazer and crisp white blouse, an outfit she'd selected carefully for this day. I need to, she replied, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands clutching the folder containing her victim impact statement. Not for him, for me. The courtroom doors opened, and conversation hushed as Robert entered, escorted by a court officer. He looked diminished somehow. Thinner. Grayer. The confident posture I'd known for 18 years replaced by a careful guardedness. His gaze swept the gallery, faltering when he saw Sarah. The naked pain in his expression was startling in its rawness. Judge Harriman entered moments later, her stern demeanor commanding immediate respect. After preliminary proceedings and confirmation of Robert's guilty plea to identity theft and fraud charges, she addressed the court. Before sentencing, I understand the victim's wish to make impact statements. Sarah Davis? Sarah's chair scraped softly as she stood. She walked to the witness, stand with deliberate steps, laying her prepared statement on the small ledge before her. The microphone amplified her shallow breathing as she surveyed the courtroom. Your Honor, she began, her voice initially wavering but gaining strength with each word. I'm Sarah Davis, the daughter of Robert Davis. I'm here to explain how my father's actions affected me and will continue to affect my future. She detailed the meticulous work she'd put into her Cornell application, the extra AP classes, the late-night study sessions, the science competitions, the carefully cultivated relationships with teachers for recommendations. When my acceptance letter arrived, I felt like everything I'd worked for had finally come together. The first person I called was my dad. Her voice cracked slightly. His enthusiasm seemed so genuine. What I didn't know was that by then, he had already begun emptying my college fund to finance his double life. Robert's head bowed lower with each sentence, his attorney's hand occasionally steadying his arm. The $120,000 my parents had saved for 18 years vanished in less than 7 months, Sarah continued. My father spent my future on luxury hotel rooms, expensive restaurants, and jewelry for his mistress. When confronted, his solution was that I should consider the state university instead because Cornell was impractical. She paused, gathering herself before continuing. Beyond the financial devastation, my father's actions taught me painful lessons about trust and family. I learned that someone can look you in the eye for years while systematically betraying everything you believed about them. I learned that 18 years of bedtime stories, science fair projects, and family dinners can be sacrificed for something as trivial as a midlife affair. Judge Harriman's pen moved steadily across her notepad, her expression revealing nothing. But I also want the court to know that my father has recently taken steps toward accountability, Sarah added, surprising me with this pivot. He has surrendered assets, admitted wrongdoing without excuses, and shown what appears to be genuine remorse. These actions don't erase the harm done, but they suggest the possibility of growth. She looked directly at Robert for the first time. I don't seek a harsh sentence out of vengeance. I'm here because truth matters, because actions have consequences that can't be wished away with apologies, no matter how sincere. Robert's eyes, red-rimmed and hollow, met hers briefly before, dropping again. I will attend Cornell this fall despite my father's actions, thanks to my mother's foresight and our family's educational trust fund. My future remains secure. His does not. Sarah gathered her notes, voice strengthening for her conclusion. Whatever sentence is imposed, my hope is not for punishment, but for a path forward. One where my father might eventually become someone worthy of trust again, if not for my sake, then for his own. As Sarah returned to her seat, the courtroom remained silent, the weight of her words lingering in the air. Judge Harriman nodded to her with what appeared to be quiet respect. The court now calls Margaret Wellington, the clerk announced. I approached the witness stand, the familiar sense of calm that had carried me through the past months settling over me again. This moment, like so many since discovering Robert's betrayal, required precision rather than passion, clarity rather than catharsis. Your Honor, I began, I am Margaret Wellington, formerly Margaret Davis. I was married to the defendant for 18 years and am the victim of his identity theft, forgery, and financial crimes against our family. I detailed the specific violations: the emptied college fund, the forged mortgage documents, the systematic financial deception that had unfolded over nearly 2 years. The monetary losses are substantial and quantifiable, I continued. But the deeper damage, the destruction of trust built over nearly 2 decades, the security shattered for our daughter, the questioning of one's own judgment that comes with profound betrayal, these cannot be calculated. Judge Harriman's attention remained focused, her occasional notes suggesting key points were being registered. In the months since these crimes were discovered, I've struggled to understand how the man I built a life with could act with such calculated deception against his own family. The simple explanation would be that Robert Davis is merely selfish and deceitful, but 18 years of marriage suggests greater complexity. I looked at Robert directly now. I believe my former husband lost himself incrementally, making small compromises that grew into larger deceptions until lying became easier than truth. Each step away from integrity made the next one easier, until finally, he couldn't find his way back to the man he once was, or perhaps wanted to be. Turning back to the judge, I outlined my position on sentencing, emphasizing the need for accountability, without vindictiveness. Robert's actions must have consequences significant enough to reflect the severity of his betrayal, but structured to allow eventual redemption should he earn it. I acknowledged his recent cooperation. The voluntary surrender of his CPA license, the comprehensive confession, the transfer of assets toward restitution. These actions suggest Robert understands the gravity of his crimes and is taking responsibility without minimizing blame. An essential first step toward genuine change, I concluded. 18 years of marriage, Your Honor, deserves more than a footnote, even when it ends in betrayal. There was love in our family. There was joy. There were genuine connections. Those truths exist alongside the harm Robert caused. I ask that your sentence reflect both realities, the severity of his crimes and the possibility of his redemption. When I returned to my seat, Sarah's fingers interlaced with mine, squeezing gently in silent support. Robert rose when called, approaching the stand with unsteady steps. His prepared statement lay before him, but he looked up from it, speaking extemporaneously instead. Your Honor, he began, voice rough with emotion, I stand before you guilty of crimes that cannot be justified or excused. I betrayed the 2 people I should have protected above all others. I violated not just the law, but the sacred trust of family. He turned partially toward where we sat. Nothing I say today can repair what I've destroyed. No apology can erase the pain I've caused. No sentence you impose can exceed the punishment of seeing my daughter's disappointment and my wife's, he corrected himself, my former wife's justified contempt. Facing the judge again, he continued, I accept full responsibility for my actions and whatever consequences this court determines appropriate. I've surrendered my professional credentials, agreed to comprehensive restitution, and pleaded guilty, without qualification. These aren't attempts to secure leniency, but the beginning of amends I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make. Judge Harriman deliberated silently for several minutes after all statements concluded. The courtroom remained hushed, the only sound the occasional shuffle of papers or clearing of throats. Mr. Davis, she finally began, you've pleaded guilty to serious financial crimes against your own family, identity theft, forgery, and misappropriation of funds held in trust for your child's education. These weren't momentary lapses, but sustained deceptions carried out over many months. She removed her glasses, fixing Robert with a direct gaze. However, I also note your lack of prior criminal history, your voluntary surrender of professional licenses. your admission of guilt, and commitment to restitution. Both victims have indicated their concern is accountability rather than revenge. The sentence came clearly: 18 months imprisonment with eligibility for release after 6 months, 5 years of probation with strict financial monitoring, and court-supervised restitution following the plan already outlined. Mr. Davis, Judge Harriman concluded, rebuilding trust after such profound betrayal is rarely achieved quickly or easily. This sentence provides consequences for your actions while allowing the possibility of redemption through consistent, transparent effort. The rest, whether your family ever forgives you, remains beyond this court's authority. That path, should it exist, must be earned through actions rather than promises. As Robert was led away by court officers, he turned once, eyes finding Sarah and me in silent acknowledgement, not pleading, not apologizing, just witnessing the closing of one chapter and the uncertain beginning of another. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited on the steps, alerted to the case of the prominent accountant who had defrauded his own family. Sarah and I slipped out a side entrance, Eleanor ushering us to her waiting car, the tinted windows shielding us from prying eyes and invasive questions. "It's over," Sarah said as we pulled away, her voice a mixture of relief and lingering sadness. "The trial is over," I corrected gently. "The rest is just beginning." The Wellington home, now officially mine again after the divorce finalization, felt cavernous in the weeks following Robert's sentencing. Sarah threw herself into preparations for Cornell, spending hours researching her professors, connecting with future classmates online, and assembling the necessities for dorm life. I found myself wandering through rooms at night, touching familiar objects that now held different meanings. Wedding photos removed from walls leaving lighter squares of paint, Robert's books missing from shelves, his clothes gone from closets. "Wellington?" Dr. Leanne Carter's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I'd been staring absently at her credentials on the wall of her office, mentally cataloging the string of letters after her name without actually reading them. "Sorry," I said, refocusing. "You were saying?" I asked what brought you to therapy at this particular moment. She sat with perfect posture in her leather chair, notepad balanced on her crossed legs, the picture of professional attentiveness. "My lawyer suggested it," I admitted. "She said unraveling a marriage this way often leaves remnants that need addressing." Dr. Carter nodded. "Eleanor Blackwell referred many clients to me over the years. She understands that legal resolution doesn't always bring emotional closure." "I'm not sure I believe in emotional closure," I said, surprising myself with the candor. "That suggests a clean end, a neat wrapping up. Nothing about this feels neat." "Fair point," she acknowledged. "Perhaps a better framework is integration rather than closure, incorporating these experiences into your understanding of yourself rather than trying to get over them." "Integration," I repeated, testing the word. "That sounds more realistic." "Tell me about your current concerns," she prompted. "What aspects of your situation feel most unresolved?" I considered this carefully. "I'm angry, obviously. Betrayed. Those are the expected emotions. But there's something else." I searched for the right words. "I keep questioning my own reality. If I could be so wrong about someone I lived with for 18 years, how can I trust my judgment about anything?" Dr. Carter's expression remained neutral, but I sensed her approval of my self-awareness. That's an extremely common response to deep betrayal. Psychologists call it reality testing, the fundamental questioning of what's real and what isn't when your basic assumptions are shattered. "It's like the ground keeps shifting," I explained. "One minute I remember Robert as this monster who systematically destroyed our daughter's future, and the next I remember him teaching Sarah to ride a bike, staying up all night when she had pneumonia in 2nd grade." "Both versions are true," Dr. Carter observed. "Humans are complex, contradictory creatures. Robert was both the devoted father and the man who betrayed his family. Holding those contradictions is part of integration. Our session continued with Dr. Carter guiding me through various techniques for processing complex grief. The mourning not just for my marriage, but for the future I'd imagined, the identity I'd constructed partly around being Robert's wife. 4. Homework, she said as our time ended. I'd like you to write 2 letters you'll never send. One to the Robert you loved for 18 years, expressing gratitude for the positive aspects of your shared life, and one to the Robert who betrayed you, expressing your anger and sense of violation. Different aspects of the same person, addressed separately. I agreed, though privately doubting the exercise's value. How could separating Robert into good and bad versions help when the whole problem was their inseparable coexistence? At home that evening, I found Sarah at the kitchen table, organizing a spreadsheet of campus activities she hoped to join at Cornell. "How was therapy?" she asked without looking up from her laptop. "Educational," I said carefully. "Dr. Carter seems insightful." Sarah nodded, then closed her computer. "I've been thinking about visiting Dad before I leave for school." The statement hung between us, her eyes watching for my reaction. Since Robert's sentencing, she'd maintained limited contact, a few letters, one brief phone call, but hadn't mentioned visiting the minimum security facility where he was serving his sentence. "If that's what you want," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Is it weird that part of me needs to see him? To make sure he's really dealing with this? Not just saying what he thinks we want to hear?" "Not weird at all," I assured her. "You're trying to make sense of something senseless." "Seeing him might help with that. Sarah studied me carefully. "Would you be upset if I went?" "No, sweetheart. Your relationship with your father is yours to define, not mine to dictate." I joined her at the table. "The only thing that would upset me is if you felt pressured, either to cut him off completely or to forgive him before you're ready." Relief crossed her face. "Thanks. I know this is harder for you. You were the one he directly betrayed." "We were both betrayed, just in different ways," I said. "And we'll both find our own paths forward, probably on different timelines." 2 days later, I drove Sarah to the correctional facility in Western Illinois, where Robert was serving his sentence. The building looked more like a community college than my preconceptions of prison: low brick structures surrounded by manicured lawns, minimal visible security. "Do you want me to come in?" I asked as we parked. She shook her head. "I need to do this alone. Will you be okay waiting?" "I brought work," I said, indicating my design portfolio on the back seat. "Take whatever time you need." As Sarah disappeared into the visitor's entrance, I found myself unexpectedly emotional, not about Robert, but about Sarah, this poised young woman navigating circumstances that would challenge someone twice her age. The resilience she'd shown throughout this ordeal wasn't just Wellington inheritance, but something uniquely hers. She emerged 90 minutes later, her expression pensive but calm. We drove in silence for several miles before she spoke. "He looks different," she said finally. "Older. Like he's finally seeing himself clearly and doesn't particularly like what he sees." I nodded, encouraging her to continue if she wished. "He didn't make excuses," she added. "Didn't try to minimize what he did or why it was wrong. He just—" She searched for the right description. "Listened. Really listened when I told him how it felt to learn about the college fund, about Emma, about the second mortgage. That sounds like progress," I offered cautiously. "Maybe," she agreed. "Or maybe just survival strategy. It's hard to know what's genuine anymore." The observation struck me with its maturity, and its echo of my own struggles with reality testing that I'd discussed with Dr. Carter. "Time will tell," I said. "Actions over months and years reveal truth more reliably than words in a moment of crisis." Sarah turned to look out the window at the passing landscape. "He's taking classes. Construction. Management certification. Says he wants to build things that last instead of numbers that don't mean anything." I absorbed this information without comment. Robert had always been skillful with his hands. The detailed model ships he'd built as a hobby, the treehouse he'd constructed for Sarah, the careful renovations to our home over the years. Perhaps there was authenticity in this new direction. "He asked about you," Sarah said quietly. "Not in a prying way. Just if you were okay." "And what did you tell him?" "That you're finding your way forward. That you've reopened your design studio. That you're seeing a therapist." She glanced at me. "Was that okay to share?" "Yes," I assured her. "Those aren't secrets." When we arrived home, Sarah headed upstairs to call her best friend, leaving me alone with thoughts I'd been avoiding. I took out my phone, scrolling to a number I'd saved but never used, the contact information for the correctional facility where Robert was being held. After several minutes of internal debate, I composed a brief message to be delivered to him. "Sarah mentioned your construction management courses. It sounds like a positive direction. Wellington women have always believed in building new foundations when necessary. Perhaps Davis men can learn the same." I signed it simply, Margaret, and pressed send before I could reconsider, then sat in the quiet kitchen, feeling neither triumph nor regret. Just the first tentative step toward whatever integration might eventually look like. The Wellington Design Studio occupied a modest storefront in Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood, its large windows filtering autumn sunlight onto the drafting tables and material samples arranged throughout the space. I'd leased it 3 months. Ago, after Sarah's departure for Cornell, created both emotional and physical space for professional expansion. Melissa, my new assistant and recent design school graduate, entered with coffee and a stack of fabric swatches. "The Hendersons confirmed. For 2 o'clock, she announced. "And the contractor called about the Peterson renovation. The original hardwoods can be salvaged after all." "Excellent," I replied, reviewing her notes on both clients. "Have you finished the preliminary sketches for the Lawson living room?" She nodded, spreading drawings across my desk. "I incorporated the mid-century influences you suggested while maintaining the traditional elements they loved." I studied her work, impressed by the balance she'd achieved between competing design aesthetics. "This is exceptional, Melissa. The integration of styles feels organic rather than forced." Her face brightened at the praise. "That's what you do. Better than anyone. Find harmony in contradiction. I'm trying to learn how you see connections others miss." The observation caught me off guard. In rebuilding my professional identity after the divorce, I hadn't considered how my personal experiences might be influencing my design approach. But Melissa was right. My recent projects all demonstrated a conscious integration of seemingly opposed elements, traditional with modern, structured with organic, light with shadow. Dr. Carter would probably have a field day with the symbolism. The door chimed as a delivery person entered with a package requiring signature. I signed for it, puzzled by the unfamiliar return address in Grand Rapids, Michigan. "Personal or business?" Melissa asked as I examined the carefully wrapped parcel. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Would you excuse me for a moment?" In my private office, I unwrapped the package with careful precision. Inside lay a wooden box of stunning craftsmanship, bird's eye maple with walnut inlay forming an intricate geometric pattern across the lid. No note accompanied it, but I recognized the design aesthetic immediately. Robert's woodworking signature, refined during years of weekend hobby projects in our garage workshop. The box's proportions matched the dimensions of Adelaide Wellington's. Trust documents perfectly, a detail Robert would remember from the few times he'd seen me retrieving papers from my old storage solution, a basic document box I'd used since inheriting the trust. I ran my fingers along the smooth edges, noting the precision of the joinery, the careful finish that highlighted the wood's natural patterns. This wasn't a mass-produced item or something he'd purchased. This was weeks of painstaking handwork. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Did you get Dad's package?" He asked if it arrived. I replied, "Just now. A wooden document box. Her response came quickly. He's been working on it for months in the prison workshop. Said it was for the Wellington Trust papers, that they deserved a proper home. I studied the box again, seeing it through this new lens. Not just craftsmanship, but symbolism. Robert creating a vessel to honor and protect the very thing he'd once resented, the financial legacy that had ultimately saved our daughter's future when his actions threatened it. "What do you think about it?" I texted Sarah. "Complicated," she replied. "Beautiful object, loaded meaning. Like everything with Dad now." Her insight, as usual, cut to the heart of the matter. The box was objectively beautiful, perhaps the finest piece Robert had ever created, and its purpose acknowledged both his past resentment and his current acceptance of the Wellington legacy's importance. My phone rang. Eleanor, calling about a trust disbursement for Sarah's second semester. "The funds will transfer next week," she assured me. "How are things otherwise? Sarah settling in at Cornell?" "Thriving," I said. "Top marks in her engineering courses, already working with a professor on a research project." "Adelaide would be proud," Eleanor remarked. "Wellington women have always excelled in male-dominated fields. And you? The design studio is going well?" "Better than expected," I admitted. "I'm actually considering hiring a second designer. The client list keeps growing." "Not surprising," Eleanor said. "People recognize authentic talent. And speaking of recognition, I received a rather unexpected call from Robert's attorney yesterday." My hand instinctively moved to the wooden box. "About what?" "The Michigan property," she said. "He wants to formalize the transfer to Sarah with a proper trust structure. Asked if I would help establish it to ensure the cabin remains protected regardless of his future circumstances." "That's thoughtful," I said, surprised by the initiative. "Indeed. A sensible provision, actually. The property will be Sarah's outright, but with legal protections similar to the Wellington Trust, insulated from future marriages, creditors, or other potential claims." Eleanor paused. "It appears Robert has learned something about long-term financial planning and asset protection. After our call ended, I placed Adelaide's trust documents into Robert's handcrafted box, noting how perfectly they fit within the custom interior. The symbolism wasn't subtle, but it felt sincere, an acknowledgement of his past failures and perhaps a gesture toward some form of amends. I hadn't responded directly to Robert since my brief message about his construction management courses 4 months earlier. Part of me still regarded any communication as a potential manipulation, a strategic move in some longer game, but another perspective had gradually emerged through my sessions with Dr. Carter. The possibility that Robert's remorse was genuine, his attempts at restitution authentic rather than calculated. Opening my laptop, I composed a short email to the address Sarah had shared for approved communications with her father. The document box arrived today. "The craftsmanship is exceptional. You've clearly maintained your skill with woodworking. The Wellington Trust papers now have a home that honors their significance. Thank you for this thoughtful gesture." I signed it Margaret and sent it before, second-guessing myself, then turned my attention back to client designs and fabric selections. The tangible, uncomplicated work of creating beautiful, functional spaces for others, while my own continued its gradual reconstruction. That evening, I met Patricia Harrington, the Wellington Trust officer, for our quarterly review dinner. We'd developed a friendly relationship beyond our professional interactions, finding common ground in our shared appreciation for financial independence and strategic planning. "The trust performance has exceeded expectations this quarter," Patricia reported as we settled at our usual corner table at Everest. "Sarah's educational expenses are fully covered with substantial reserve, and the core principal continues to grow. Adelaide's foresight continues to amaze me," I remarked. "She structured everything so carefully, anticipating challenges we couldn't possibly have foreseen." Patricia nodded, studying me over her wine glass. The Wellington women have always played the long game, Margaret, planning not just for immediate needs but generations ahead. She hesitated before adding, "Speaking of long-term planning, have you given any thought to your own estate structure beyond the trust?" The question caught me off guard. Not specifically. The Wellington Trust passes to Sarah automatically, and my personal assets are modest by comparison. But growing, Patricia observed. Your design business is flourishing from what Eleanor tells me. And there's the house, your investments, potentially other assets from the divorce settlement over time. She was right. While the Wellington Trust represented generational wealth, my own financial position had strengthened significantly since reestablishing my career and finalizing the divorce. Robert's restitution payments, though modest individually, would accumulate over years. "You're suggesting I need a more comprehensive estate plan," I said, recognizing the direction of her guidance. "I'm suggesting you're building something that deserves the same care and protection Adelaide gave to her legacy," Patricia corrected gently. "Something uniquely yours, separate from the Wellington Trust, but potentially just as meaningful to future generations." The concept resonated unexpectedly. In focusing so intently on protecting Adelaide's legacy for Sarah, I'd overlooked the legacy I might be creating myself. Not just financial assets, but the example of resilience, reinvention, and independent identity I was establishing in this new chapter. "I'd welcome your guidance," I told Patricia. "Perhaps it's time to create something that reflects my journey, not just Adelaide's foresight." As we discussed potential structures and approaches, I felt a sense of ownership over my future that had been missing in the painful aftermath of Robert's betrayal. The Wellington Trust had been my safety net, my grandmother's gift that had protected Sarah's education when Robert's actions threatened it. But whatever I built now would be entirely mine, a testament not to what I'd inherited, but to what I'd overcome, learned, and created from the ruins of broken trust. Like the designs taking shape in my studio, this new foundation would incorporate both traditional wisdom and fresh perspective, both hard-earned caution and carefully cultivated hope. The Michigan lakeside cabin glowed with autumn sunset light as I carried the last box from my car up the weathered wooden steps. Inside, Sarah was already arranging her laptop and engineering textbooks on the rustic dining table, preparing for our long weekend together, her fall break from Cornell coinciding with a rare lull in my design commissions. "Mom, come look at this," she called, waving me toward a small alcove off the main living area that I'd never particularly noticed during our family vacations here. What had once been an unremarkable storage nook had been transformed into a compact home office. A built-in desk of the same bird's-eye maple as my document box curved along the window wall, providing views of the lake while maximizing the limited space. Floating shelves above held a carefully curated collection of Sarah's childhood, books, science awards, and family photographs. Only those featuring her and me, I noted, no Robert. "Dad had this built while I was at Cornell," Sarah explained. "Said every Wellington woman needs her own workspace." She ran her hand along the smooth desktop. "The contractor finished it last week." I examined the craftsmanship, recognizing Robert's design influence even though he couldn't have built it himself from prison. The details, the specific curve of the desk edge, the proportions of the shelving, the hidden cable management system, all reflected his architectural precision and attention to functionality. "It's beautiful," I acknowledged. "Perfect for studying. Or for you to work when you visit," Sarah pointed out. "Dad said it was designed for both of us. Adjustable desk height, dual monitor mounts, everything ergonomic." The thoughtfulness of the addition struck me. Not just its existence, but the careful consideration of both our needs, the absence of any personal claim or presence from Robert himself. He'd created a Wellington women's space within a property he'd secretly kept separate throughout our marriage, then legally transferred to Sarah without conditions. "What do you think it means?" Sarah asked, watching me process this latest gesture. Is he still trying to earn forgiveness, or is it something else now? I considered the question carefully. I think it might be acceptance, I said finally. Recognition of who we are, Wellington women with our own path, our own legacy. Perhaps he's finally seeing us clearly, without the insecurity and resentment. That clouded his perspective during our marriage. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. He's different in his letters now. Less desperate for approval, more, I don't know, substantive? He writes about what he's learning in his construction management program, books he's reading about architectural history, questions about my engineering projects that actually show he understands the concepts. People can change, I allowed, surprising myself with the admission. Not always, not reliably, but sometimes crisis forces genuine self-examination. Do you think you'll ever forgive him? Sarah asked, the question direct but her tone gentle. I moved to the window, watching golden light shimmer across the lake's surface. Forgiveness is complicated, I said. There's the emotional aspect, letting go of anger, moving beyond resentment. That's happening gradually, though perhaps never completely. And the other aspect, she prompted. Trust, I said simply. Forgiveness without restored trust is just words. Your father shattered trust at the most fundamental level. Rebuilding, that, if it's even possible, would require years of consistent evidence that he's truly changed, not just temporarily reformed due to consequences. Sarah considered this, twisting a strand of hair around her finger, a habit from childhood that emerged when she was processing complex thoughts. I think I understand the difference now. I can forgive him. Forgiving him for what he did, to me. But trusting him again is a separate decision, one I haven't made yet. Exactly, I confirmed. And you don't need to rush either process. Trust especially can't be forced or fabricated. It must be earned through patterns of behavior, over time. We spent that evening settling into the cabin, reacquainting ourselves with a space that held complicated memories for both of us. After Sarah went to bed, I sat on the dock wrapped in a blanket against the October chill, remembering summer evenings when we'd been a family of 3, watching sunsets from this same spot, Robert's arm around my shoulders, Sarah cataloging, constellations as they appeared. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Trust distributions for next semester processed. Also, Robert's attorney contacted me again. Restitution payments continuing as scheduled, no issues. How's the cabin? The cabin. Peaceful, I replied. Sarah loves it here. Robert had a study nook built for her. Beautifully designed, thoughtfully executed. Interesting, Eleanor texted back. His parole hearing is next month. Early release likely after serving minimum. 6 months. Coleman says he'll be moving to Grand Rapids as planned, starting with Lakeside Builders in January if approved. I absorbed this information without immediate response. Robert's imminent release had been expected, but seeing it confirmed made it suddenly tangible. 6 months into his 18-month sentence, he'd be re-entering the world, beginning his new career in construction management just a few hours from where Sarah and I sat now. Sarah mentioned he's been writing regularly, I finally replied. Seems focused on his education and future plans. Good sign, Eleanor texted. Accountability without self-pity suggests genuine growth. Time will tell. Time will tell. The phrase had become something of a mantra since Robert's betrayal and arrest. Acknowledgement that only sustained patterns over years, not promises or temporary reforms, could reveal whether change was superficial or substantive. The following morning, Sarah and I hiked along the lakeshore trail, golden leaves crunching beneath our boots. The physical exertion felt cleansing, our conversation flowing easily between her engineering projects and my design clients, both of us finding creative fulfillment in our respective fields. I've been thinking about Great-Grandma Wellington, Sarah said as we paused to watch a heron fishing near the shoreline, about how her trust changed our lives in ways she couldn't have imagined. Adelaide was remarkably prescient, I agreed. creating financial independence for Wellington women across generations. But it's more than the money, Sarah insisted. It's the mindset, the expectation that we'll build our own paths, maintain our identities even within partnerships, protect what matters most. She glanced at me. I've been reading her journals, the ones you gave me before I left for Cornell. I smiled, remembering the leather-bound volumes I'd passed to Sarah, Adelaide's private thoughts and observations spanning decades, preserved and handed down through Wellington women. Her first marriage was a disaster, Sarah continued. Her husband gambled away nearly everything before she divorced him, scandalous for that era. The trust wasn't just financial protection, it was a philosophical statement about what she'd learned, that women must maintain independence even within marriage. A lesson that served us well, I acknowledged, though not in ways I'd anticipated. As we continued our hike, Sarah revealed that she'd started her own journal, a modern continuation of Adelaide's tradition. I'm documenting everything, she explained. The discovery of Dad's betrayal, the college fund crisis, how the Wellington Trust saved my education. But also the aftermath, how we're rebuilding, how we're defining forgiveness on our own terms. Her initiative touched me deeply. Future Wellington women will learn from your experience, just as we learned from Adelaide's. That's exactly it, she said, eyes bright with purpose. This isn't just our story. It's part of the Wellington legacy now. How to survive betrayal. How to protect what matters. How to rebuild with wisdom rather than bitterness. Back at the cabin that afternoon, I found myself drawn to the handcrafted desk in the study nook. Sitting in the ergonomic chair, adjusting it to my height as Sarah had mentioned was possible, I gazed out at the lake while opening my laptop. Almost without conscious decision, I began typing an email to Robert, the first I'd initiated beyond. Brief acknowledgments of his communications. The workspace you designed for the cabin is remarkable. Functional, beautiful, and thoughtfully conceived for both Sarah and me. She's thriving at Cornell, her engineering studies challenging her in all the right ways. The Wellington Trust continues to secure her education, just as Adelaide intended across generations. We've been hiking the lakeshore trails today, discussing Adelaide's journals and the Wellington legacy of independence. Sarah has begun keeping her own journal, documenting not just the crisis your actions created, but the resilience that followed. She's integrating this chapter into her understanding of who we are and what we stand for as Wellington women. I don't know what the future holds for any of us, Robert. Trust, once broken as thoroughly as you broke ours, doesn't mend easily or quickly. But Sarah mentions changes in your letters that suggest genuine reflection rather than strategic reformation. The study nook you've created here speaks to that same possibility, recognition of who we are without attempting to insert yourself into that identity. Eleanor mentioned your parole hearing next month. Your plans to begin work with Lakeside Builders in January. Whatever path your life takes from here, I hope it includes continued respect for the boundaries and independent identities Sarah and I have established. Not because we demand it as punishment, but because recognizing others' autonomy is fundamental to any healthy relationship, something I believe you're beginning to understand in ways you couldn't before. Adelaide Wellington established her trust after her first husband nearly destroyed everything through gambling and deceit. She created financial independence for generations of Wellington women, a legacy that ultimately saved Sarah's future when your actions threatened it. There's a powerful symmetry there that I'm still processing, still integrating into my understanding of our story. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust you again, Robert, but I can acknowledge the steps you're taking toward becoming someone worthy of trust. The beautiful document box you crafted for Adelaide's trust papers. This thoughtful workspace that honors our identities without claiming space for yourself. The consistent restitution payments. The educational path that focuses on building rather than manipulating. Time will reveal whether these changes reflect genuine transformation or temporary reformation due to consequences. But the Wellington women will continue our path regardless. Strong, independent, resilient. Sarah carries that legacy forward now, enhanced rather than diminished by the challenges your actions created. Margaret. I read the email twice before sending it, recognizing it as a milestone in my own healing process. Acknowledgement without blind forgiveness, recognition of positive steps without naive trust, closure on my own terms rather than according to others' expectations. Sarah found me still sitting at the desk, watching sunset colors paint the lake in golds and purples. "Everything okay?" she asked, noticing my contemplative mood. "Yes," I said, realizing the truth in that simple word. "Everything is proceeding as it should." That evening, we built a fire in the lakeside fire pit, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories as stars appeared above us. A Wellington tradition that predated Robert, that would continue beyond the rupture he'd caused. Sarah spoke of her engineering ambitions, her dreams of designing sustainable infrastructure. I shared updates on my expanding design studio, the professional fulfillment I'd rediscovered. The conversation turned, as it often did now, to Adelaide Wellington and her legacy. "Do you think she imagined this?" Sarah asked, gesturing between us. "That her trust would not just fund education, but save it from betrayal within the family?" Adelaide understood human nature, I replied, remembering passages from her journals. She knew that protection must account for threats from all quarters, economic downturns, societal restrictions on women, and yes, perhaps even betrayal by those closest to us. Sarah nodded thoughtfully, adding another log to the fire. "I'm thinking of majoring in structural engineering with a focus on resilient design, creating buildings that can withstand unexpected stresses, adapt to changing conditions." The metaphor wasn't lost on me. A very Wellington approach, I observed, building with both beauty and resilience in mind. As sparks rose toward the star-filled sky, I felt a sense of completion, not of our story, which would continue evolving, through years of consequences, growth, and rebuilding, but of this particular chapter. The crisis Robert's betrayal had precipitated had been navigated, the immediate damage contained, new foundations established. Whatever came next, Robert's release, his attempted amends, the gradual rebuilding of trust or its permanent absence, Sarah and I would face it not as victims of betrayal, but as Wellington women, independent, resourceful, authors of our own legacy. The Wellington Trust had saved Sarah's education when Robert emptied her college fund for his mistress. But the true Wellington fortune had never been merely financial. It was the inheritance of resilience, the legacy of independence, the wealth of wisdom passed from Adelaide to me, to Sarah, strengthening with each generation's trials and triumphs. That was the fortune Robert had never understood, the treasure he couldn't spend or steal, the true Wellington legacy that would endure long after bank accounts and betrayals faded into family history.